The morning dew still covered the roses when I heard the sound of expensive heels crunching on the garden path. I didn't need to look up, I already knew who it was. Only one person would wear designer shoes just to walk through my father's precious garden. Still messing around in the dirt, I see, came Laura's voice, fake and sugary. I kept trimming my father's white roses, the same ones he planted for my wedding. That wedding ended in a divorce, and my ex-husband ran off with the very woman standing behind me now. "Hello, Mary. You know why I'm here," she said, stepping closer. Her shadow stretched over the flower bed. "The will is being read tomorrow, and James and I think it would be better if we had a calm talk beforehand." I finally stood up and wiped my dirty hands on my gardening apron. "There's nothing to talk about. This is my father's house." "His estate," Mary corrected, her bright red lips turning into a smug grin. "And since James was like a son to John for 17 years, we believe we deserve a fair share." The garden scissors in my hand suddenly felt heavier. "You mean the same James who cheated on his wife, my father's daughter, with his secretary?" I asked. "That's all in the past," Mary said, waving her polished fingers like it meant nothing. "John forgave him. They still played golf together every Friday until..." She stopped for effect. My father had only been gone for 3 weeks. The pain was still fresh. And now this woman, like a vulture, was circling around what she thought she could grab easily. "My father wouldn't have left James anything," I said, standing up straight. "He made a lot of mistakes, but he wasn't a fool." Mary's fake smile twitched for a second. "We'll see. Your brother Frank seems to think otherwise." The mention of my brother gave me a shiver. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. He spent more time comforting James than talking to me. "You talked to Frank?" I asked. "Oh, sweetheart." Mary leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "We've done more than just talk. He's been very helpful." I gripped the garden shears tighter, thinking of something Dad once told me. The roses need a strong hand, Lauren, but never a harsh one. Even the thorns have their place. "Leave my property, Mary," I said quietly, "before I forget how to be polite." She laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "Your property? That's adorable. This house is worth millions, Laura. Did you really think you could keep it all to yourself? Pretending to play house in your daddy's mansion while the rest of us get nothing?" "My father built this house with his own hands," I said, my voice steady. "Brick by brick." I spoke calmly, even though I was filled with anger. "He planted every tree, designed every room. This isn't about money. It's about what he built, about what he wanted to leave behind." Mary let out a short laugh. "Legacy? Come on, Laura. Everything is about money. And tomorrow, when they read the will, you'll finally get it." She turned to go, but stopped at the garden gate. "Oh, and you should start packing. James and I will need at least a month to fix things up before we move in." As her heels clicked away down the path, I looked down at the roses. Their white petals were now stained with dirt from where my shaky hands had crushed them. Dad always said white roses meant a fresh start, but all I could see now was red. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand. "Julie, it's me. Mary just came by," I said. "Yeah, she's just as awful as we guessed. Can you come over? There's something about the will I need to talk to you about." Her voice was calm and strong. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't worry, Laura. Your dad was a lot smarter than they think." After I hung up, something caught my eye. A small envelope was sticking out from under one of the rose bushes. The corner was wet with morning dew. I knew the handwriting right away. It was my dad's, and it had my name on it. I picked it up with shaking hands, wondering how long it had been hidden there, tucked between the thorns. The envelope felt heavy, like it held more than just words. "Well, Dad," I whispered, turning it over in my hands, "looks like you left me one last surprise." As the sound of Mary's car disappeared, I stood in the garden holding what felt like the first clue in a mystery my father had left behind. Whatever plan Mary and James had, I had a feeling they were about to realize they messed with the wrong person. Julie showed up right on time, just like she said. She walked in with her legal folder in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. I figured we might need this, she said with a half smile, holding up the wine as she stepped into Dad's study. I was still holding the sealed envelope, sitting on the edge of Dad's leather chair. The room still smelled like his old pipe and books. I wasn't ready to give it all up to Mary's plans. You haven't opened it yet? Julie asked, setting her folder down with a loud thump. I wanted to wait for you, I said softly, turning the envelope in my fingers again. Mary said Frank's helping them. After that, I didn't want to face it alone. Julie poured 2 big glasses of wine. Your dad was very clear about certain things only being shared at the right time. I looked up quickly. What do you mean? She handed me my glass. Open the letter, Laura. With trembling fingers, I did. I opened the envelope. Inside was 1 piece of paper and a small key. Dear Lauren, I read aloud. I could almost hear my dad's voice in my mind. If you're reading this, then someone has already started going after the estate. Knowing how people are, I'm guessing it's Mary. She always reminded me of a shark, all teeth and no heart. Julie laughed into her wine glass. The key I've included opens the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside, you'll find everything you need to protect what's rightfully yours. Remember what I taught you about chess. Sometimes you have to give up a small piece to protect the most important one. Love, Dad. I looked up at Julie. She was already heading toward the desk. You knew about this? I asked. I helped him plan it, she admitted, waving for me to come use the key. Your dad came to me 7 months ago, right after he found out he was sick. He knew exactly what might happen. The drawer clicked open easily. Inside was a large folder and a USB drive. Before you check those, Julie said, sitting on the edge of the desk, there's something you should know about tomorrow's while reading. Your dad added something called a codicil 2 days before he passed. A what? I asked. A change to the will, she explained. And it's going to turn everything upside down. I opened the folder and laid everything out on the desk. Dozens of photos spilled out. Mary meeting someone in a dark parking lot. James's walking into a lawyer's office that wasn't Julie's. There were also printed emails, bank statements. My dad had them looked into, I whispered. Not just looked into, Julie said with a sharp smile. He had them followed. She pointed at the USB drive. That has video footage of Mary trying to pay off your dad's nurse, just 3 days before he died. She wanted information about the will. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the photos. Is that Frank? I asked. Meeting with Mary? 2 weeks before Dad passed. Julie nodded. Yes. But look at the next one. The second photo showed my brother leaving the meeting. He looked sick, angry, and disgusted. He was holding what looked like a check. He kept the check as proof, Julie said, and gave it straight to your father. That's when your dad realized he had to act quickly. But Mary said Frank was helping them. I said, confused. Your brother was pretending, Julie explained. He gave them just enough information to make them feel safe, while actually helping your dad gather proof of what they were doing. I dropped back into the chair, my thoughts racing. Why didn't he tell me? Because Mary needed to believe she was in control, Julie said. Then she pulled out more documents from her briefcase. Tomorrow, when I read the will, Mary and James will think they've won. The first reading will give them a big part of the estate, Julie said. What? I stood up so fast that my wine glass tipped over, spilling red wine onto the carpet. Let me finish, Julie said, holding up her hand. That's when the codicil takes effect. Your dad set a trap, Laura. As soon as they accept the inheritance, it triggers a clause that exposes all their lies and tricks. The photos, the videos, the bribes, it all becomes public. I looked at all the evidence spread out on the desk. It finally made sense. He let them think they won so they'd expose themselves? Exactly, Julie said, smiling with pride. The Real will gives everything to you. There's even a trust for Frank. Mary and James get nothing, except public shame for who they really are. And tomorrow? I asked. Julie finished her wine with a smirk. Tomorrow, we watch them walk right into their own trap. It's your father's final lesson about consequences. I picked up his letter again, running my fingers over the handwriting I knew so well. Even after death, He was protecting me, guiding me, helping me stand up for myself. There's one more thing, Julie said softly. Frank wants to see you tonight. He says there's something you need to know before tomorrow. I looked out the study window as the sun began to set. I thought about my brother, about Mary's smug smile in the garden, and about the careful plan my father had built. Tell him to come, I said. It's time for a family talk. Frank arrived after dark. He looked nothing like the confident man who stood next to James at the funeral. His fancy suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He paused at the doorway, holding a leather folder like it was a shield. You look awful, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Yeah, well, he replied with a weak smile. Being a double agent isn't as exciting as it looks in movies. Come in, I said, pointing to the chair across from me. Julie had left an hour ago, but the desk was still covered with everything we had uncovered earlier. Frank glanced at the photos. So, you found Dad's backup plan. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? I asked. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to. He sank into the chair. Because I needed to fix things. After what happened with James and how I acted during your divorce. I was wrong, Lauren. I was a fool. You were my brother, I said, correcting him. You were supposed to be on my side. I know, he whispered. He opened the folder and pulled out a check. Mary gave me this. She wanted me to lie, say that Dad wasn't in his right mind when he signed the final will. $500,000 just to betray you. I stared at the check, then at my brother. But you didn't cash it. No, he said quietly. I gave it straight to Dad, Frank said, his voice shaking. You should have seen his face, Lauren. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. That's when he told me about his plan. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 9. Each loud sound echoed through the quiet room. There's more, Frank said, taking out his phone. I recorded everything. Every meeting, every offer, every threat. Mary, she's been planning this for months, even before Dad got sick. He pressed play. Mary's voice filled the room. Once the old man dies, we'll challenge the will. With your testimony that he wasn't thinking clearly, and with James's close connection to him, we'll get everything. Laura won't see it coming. I clenched my hands into fists. When was this? 3 months ago. But wait, it gets worse. He skipped ahead in the recording. Now it was James's voice. We'll sell the house, cash out the assets. Laura can go back to her little apartment and that silly gardening job. She never deserved any of this anyway. Turn it off, I whispered. Frank stopped the audio, then pulled out one more paper. This is why I came tonight. Mary didn't just want money, Lauren. She wanted revenge. Revenge? For what? For making James feel guilty for the alimony, and he paused, for exposing them when you caught them together. The memory hit me like a punch, walking into my bedroom and finding them there. Mary smiling like she'd won everything as my marriage fell apart. She was his secretary for 2 years, Frank went on. She planned it all, slowly became part of his life, then made sure she got close to Dad and his business circle. He handed me the document. This proves she started stealing from Dad's company 7 months before you caught them. I grabbed the paper and scanned the page, bank transfers, account numbers, all of it laid out. Dad found out. I asked. Right before his diagnosis, Frank said. He was putting a case together, but once the cancer came, he changed the plan. He said sometimes justice has to take a different path. The codicil, I whispered. Frank nodded. Yeah. Tomorrow's going to be rough, Lauren. They think they've won. Mary even hired a film crew to capture the big moment when they take control of the estate. Even after everything, I let out a short laugh. She brought cameras to film her own downfall. Dad would have loved that. Frank smiled for real this time. Look, I know I can't fix everything that's happened over the last 2 years. But I want you to know, I'm here now. No matter what happens tomorrow, I've got your back. I stood and walked over to the window. The garden was glowing under the moonlight. Remember when we were kids and Dad caught us fighting over that red toy car? Frank joined me at the window. Yeah. He made us wash every window in the house. Said we needed to learn how to see things clearly. I turned to my brother. I understand now, Frank. I see what Dad was trying to teach us, even at the very end. Frank nodded. His eyes showed he understood too. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning, it's letting your enemies destroy themselves, I added. The grandfather clock rang again. It was 1/4 past the hour, a reminder that tomorrow was getting closer with every tick. You should get some sleep, Frank said, gathering the papers and photos. Tomorrow's going to be a show to remember. As I watched him leave, I rested my hand on the window glass. It was cold and firm beneath my fingers. Dad had always loved these windows. He used to call them the eyes of the house, always watching over the family. Tomorrow, they would watch as justice was finally served, just the way he had planned it. The morning of the will reading came with clear skies and bright sun. I was back in Dad's study, watching Julie set out documents on his big oak desk. Around the room, camera crews were setting up their equipment. Mary's film crew is here, Frank said as he walked in. You should see her outside. She's practicing her sweet acceptance speech. Is everything ready? I asked Julie. She tapped her briefcase. All set. The codicil is sealed in this envelope, along with copies of every piece of evidence. Once they agree to the first part of the will, the rest will follow. Suddenly, noise from the hallway broke the moment. We heard Mary's voice, high-pitched and cheerful. This is where we'll hang the new chandelier. The old one is so out of style. Places, everyone, Julie said, adjusting her jacket. Let the show begin. Mary walked in first, wearing an expensive black dress that probably cost more than some people's entire month of pay. James followed her, looking uneasy in a perfectly fitted suit. The camera crew came right behind, adjusting lights and checking the camera angles. Laura, James said, giving me a stiff nod. It was the first time he had spoken to me directly since the divorce. Let's begin, Julie said, standing behind Dad's desk. As John's lawyer, I will read his last will and testament, along with any other documents he left behind. Mary nearly bounced in her chair with excitement. We're ready. Just like Julie had warned me, the first reading sounded like a win for them. Dad's estate, his home and his shares in the company, was to be split. 70% to me and 30% to James and Mary. I knew it, Mary squealed, grabbing James's arm. John loved us too much to leave us out. But Julie spoke again, her voice cutting through Mary's celebration. There's a codicil added to the will, 2 days before John passed away. Mary's smile faded. A what? A change to the will, James said quietly, looking nervous. What kind of change? Julie opened the sealed envelope. Any person who accepts the inheritance listed in this will agrees to a full investigation into certain financial issues found in the months before John died. The room fell completely silent. Even the camera crew seemed frozen. What financial issues? Mary asked, her voice no longer full of joy. Maybe these will help explain, Julie said, sliding a group of photos across the desk. Or this USB drive. There's video of someone trying to bribe John's nurse. Or these bank records that show money being stolen from Jeremy Industries. James picked up one of the photos. His face turned pale. Where did you get all of this? Dad kept a lot of evidence, Frank said from the corner, including recordings of both of you planning to challenge the will by lying about his mental health. Mary stood up so fast her chair fell over. Turn those cameras off.
Now.
Oh no, I said, stepping forward. The cameras stay. You wanted this moment recorded, remember? You can't do this, she snapped. James, tell them they can't do this. But James was still staring at one photo, the one showing him walking into a rival company's office carrying confidential files. The codicil is very clear, Julie said calmly. If you try to accept any part of the inheritance, this evidence will be sent to the authorities. The decision is yours. Decision? Mary laughed bitterly. What decision? You've trapped us. No, I told her. You trapped yourselves. Every lie, every plan, every attempt to take what wasn't yours brought you here. This is your doing. This is your fault, she shouted, turning on Frank. You were supposed to help us. Frank shrugged. I did help, just not you. James, she begged. Say something. But James was already standing, trying to straighten his tie, even though his hands were shaking. It's over, Mary. We lost. The hell it is, she screamed. I won't let that girl win. She's nothing. That girl, came Dad's voice, loud and clear across the room, is my daughter. Everyone froze. Julie had pressed play on a video. Dad's face appeared on one of the screens, looking tired but strong. It had been recorded just days before he died. And if you're watching this, he said, then you've shown your true colors, just like I expected. I knew you would, Dad's voice said in the video. Greed is a bad teacher, but consequences always teach well. Mary's mascara ran down her face in black streaks as she slowly backed toward the door. This isn't over, she hissed. Actually, Julie said calmly, it is. The police are waiting in the front hallway. They want to talk to you about the stolen money. I suggest you cooperate. It might help when they decide your punishment. As Mary and James were taken away by officers, with the cameras still recording, I felt my dad's presence all around the room. He had planned everything, not just to protect his name and business, but to teach one final lesson about justice, patience, and truth. Well, Frank said into the quiet room, I guess the cameras did capture their big moment, just not the one Mary was hoping for. The media attention afterward was exactly what Mary had wanted, but in the worst way. By evening, news vans were parked outside, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from reporters. You need to see this, Frank said, turning up the volume on Dad's old TV in the study. Mary's arrest was being shown on every channel. Her tear-streaked face looked even worse next to her expensive dress as police officers led her into a squad car. The investigation into Jeremy Industries has uncovered multiple cases of fraud, the reporter said. Turn it off, I said, rubbing my forehead. I can't watch anymore. Just then, Julie burst into the room, holding up her phone with a big smile. It gets better, she said. The district attorney just called. They found offshore bank accounts, fake companies, everything. Mary wasn't just stealing from your dad's business. She was running an entire fraud operation. And James? I asked, not even sure why I still cared about him. He's telling them everything, Frank said. Turns out he's not so loyal when he's looking at real prison time. A loud knock at the study door made all of us jump. A police detective stepped in, looking a bit sorry. Miss Jeremy, he said, we need to go over some new evidence we've found. There's more? I asked, motioning for him to sit. What now? We found documents in Miss Henry's apartment, he said. It looks like this wasn't her first time doing something like this. There are at least 3 other cases where she tried the same thing with other wealthy families. But she never made it this far before. Julie leaned forward. Other families? Yes. She usually got close to them by working for them or through mutual friends, the detective explained. Then she'd find ways to take over their money and property. He opened a folder and slid it across the table. Sound familiar? The secretary job, I whispered. It wasn't random. No, it wasn't, the detective confirmed. She targeted your ex-husband because of his link to your father's business. The affair? That was just her way in. My stomach turned. For 2 years, I had blamed myself for the end of my marriage. But now everything looked different. There's one more thing, the detective said. We found this in her private files. It's a full plan of what she was going to do once she took control of the estate. He handed me a paper that made my heart freeze. It had detailed notes about accidents that could happen to me after the house was transferred. There were also plans to blame Frank for stealing money and even drawings showing how she wanted to tear down Dad's garden and redesign the house. She would have killed me, I said quietly. She never would have gotten the chance, Frank growled, holding tightly onto the arm of his chair. The detective nodded seriously. This new evidence increases the charges. Along with the fraud and bribery, she's now facing 17 to 22 years in prison, at the very least. After he left, we all sat in silence, still trying to take it all in. Then Julie's phone buzzed again. It's my contact from the DA's office, she said, reading the message. James just finished his statement. He admitted everything, Even that he helped Mary get access to private company files before your dad passed. Did he know about her plan to hurt me? I asked. Frank looked through the documents.
No.
According to this, she kept that part a secret. She probably knew he wouldn't go along with it. Then a thought hit me. Dad knew, didn't he? That's why he planned all of this. Julie nodded slowly.
Yes. He suspected something.
That's why he hired private investigators and recorded everything. He wasn't just protecting his company, he was protecting you. I walked over to the window. Outside, the garden was filled with reporters and news vans. But the roses still bloomed, peaceful and untouched, unaware of the disaster Mary had planned for them. We should release a statement, Frank said. We need to get ahead of the story before Mary's lawyers twist the truth. I already wrote one, Julie said, pulling out her laptop. It's simple, says we're working with the police and asking for privacy during this time. It's professional, respectful. Everything Mary never was. Dad would have liked that, I said softly, managing a small smile. There's one more thing, Frank said, pulling an envelope from inside his jacket. I found this in Dad's personal safe. It's labeled, "After justice is served." My hands shook as I opened it. I knew the handwriting right away. It was my dad's. My dear Lauren, if you're reading this, then the truth has finally come out. Don't let this experience harden your heart. The garden still needs your care and life still needs living. I didn't set this plan in motion just for justice. I did it so you could be free. Free from fear. Free from doubt. And free to bloom again. Love, Dad. Outside, the reporters were still talking live on TV about the scandal, the arrests, and the betrayal. But inside Dad's study, surrounded by everything he left behind to protect me, I felt something I hadn't felt since I caught James with Mary 2 years ago.
Peace.
So, Frank said quietly, breaking the silence. What now? I looked out at the roses, then at my brother, then at Julie. Now, I said, we rebuild. Together. The first court hearing came faster than any of us expected, just 1 month after the will reading. I sat in the courtroom, watching as Mary and James were brought in wearing orange prison uniforms, very different from the fancy clothes they used to wear. All rise, the bailiff called. Julie squeezed my hand as we stood. She had insisted on being both my lawyer and my support, saying sometimes you need both legal skills and a friend by your side. You don't have to talk today, she whispered. The evidence speaks for itself. But I knew I had to. Dad's last letter said not to let this make me bitter. Staying quiet would feel too much like fear. As Mary walked past our bench, her eyes met mine. I saw pure anger in her face, but something else too. Fear. Her lawyer had been trying to make a deal, but the district attorney wasn't going to agree, not with all the proof stacked against her. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, the state would like to submit exhibits A through F, showing 2 years of fraud and planning. I sat quietly as they showed photos, bank records, and secret recordings. With each new piece of evidence, Mary's face turned whiter. James didn't even look up. He just stared at his hands, shoulders slumped. The state calls Laura Jeremy to the stand. Walking to the witness stand felt like crossing a huge distance. I could feel every eye on me. Reporters writing quickly, the jury leaning in, and Mary staring holes into my back. Please state your name for the record. Laura Jeremy. Can you explain your relationship with the defendants? I took a deep breath and looked right at Mary. James was my husband for 17 years. Mary was his secretary, and the woman he had an affair with. And after your divorce? They got married 7 months later. Then they started visiting my father often, while he was sick. Objection. Mary's lawyer said, standing. That's not relevant. It shows motive, the prosecutor replied. It proves they planned this step by step. Overruled, the judge said. Continue. I talked about everything, the visits, how they tricked my father, Mary's threats in the garden, and all the evidence Dad had gathered. With every word, I could see Mary's lies falling apart. Miss Jeremy, the prosecutor said, holding up the papers found in Mary's apartment, when did you find out about these plans to harm you? Objection. Mary's lawyer shouted. That's all just theory. These documents describe real plans to hurt the witness after they took over the estate, the prosecutor said. The judge looked at Mary over his glasses. Overruled. I found out after their arrest, I said calmly. My father thought something like this might happen. That's why he collected all that proof. That's why he changed his will. He was still protecting me, even after he passed away. Suddenly, Mary stood up, the sound of her handcuffs loud in the room. He was a controlling old man who couldn't stand to see his precious daughter lose anything. Mary shouted, This whole thing is a setup. Miss Henry, sit down. The judge ordered firmly. You think you've won? Mary yelled at me. You think this is over? I made your husband leave you once. I ruined your marriage. And I'll find a way to ruin everything else, too. The courtroom broke into chaos. Officers rushed to hold Mary back as she kept screaming threats. James looked like he wished he could disappear. Order, the judge shouted, slamming his gavel like thunder. Remove the defendant. As they dragged Mary out of the courtroom, still shouting, I caught Frank's eye. He gave me a small nod. Everything she just screamed had been recorded in court, destroying any chance she had of gaining sympathy from the jury. The judge called for a break, and Julie quickly guided me out of the courtroom. In the hallway, reporters shouted questions, but Julie led me past them like a pro. Once we were in a quiet room, she let out a breath. Well, she said, that outburst just sealed her fate. Did you see James's face? Frank said as he joined us and closed the door. He finally saw her for who she really is. I dropped into a chair, feeling completely drained. Dad knew. He knew exactly how she'd react when she was cornered. People like her can't handle losing control, Julie said, checking her phone. The DA just texted me. They're moving forward with more charges because of what she said in court. How much time is she facing now? I asked. 30-6 to 40 years at least, Julie replied. James might get less for helping, but he's still looking at 12 to 17. I thought of Dad's roses, still blooming peacefully in the garden. He always said, the truth finds its way to the light eventually. Speaking of truth, Frank said, there's something else you need to know. It's about Dad's evidence, something we found in his safe this morning. Back in Dad's study, Frank pulled out an old, worn leather journal. The police found this during a final search of Mary's apartment, he said. It was hidden in a fake bottom of her desk drawer. What is it? I asked, reaching for the journal. Frank held it back for a second. Before you read this, you need to understand Dad knew about it. That's why he was so sure about Mary's real intentions. Julie leaned forward. Is this what I think it is? Frank nodded.
Yes.
Her playbook. It's a detailed record of every family she's targeted, every scam she ran, including her original plans for us. Frank opened the journal to a marked page and began to read. The Jeremy family is the perfect target. Rich father, tense family relationships, a daughter who trusts too easily. The husband is the weak point, easily fooled by compliments and attention. My stomach turned. Stop. You need to hear this, Lauren, Frank said, continuing. Phase 1 complete. Marriage destroyed. Phase 2, separate the daughter from her support system. Phase 3, earn the father's trust. Final phase, remove all obstacles permanently. That's when Dad confronted her, isn't it? I asked, remembering how suddenly he'd insisted on changing his will. Julie nodded. He showed me this journal 2 months ago. That's when we started building the case. There's more, Frank said, flipping to another section. She wasn't working alone. There's a whole group behind these scams. Names, dates, bank accounts, everything. Just then, a sharp knock broke the silence. The detective from earlier stepped into the room, looking even more serious than before. We've been digging into Ms. Henry's background, he said. And we found something big. She's not who she says she is. He laid a stack of documents on Dad's desk. Birth certificates, passports, driver's licenses, all with different names, but the same face. Her real name is Jennifer Aniston. She's wanted in 2 states for similar crimes. The FBI has been searching for her for years. Jennifer Aniston, I repeated. The name hit me hard. Isn't she the woman who was convicted in California for killing that businessman? The case was ruled an accident, the detective said. But yes, same person. She served 6 years for fraud, got out, changed her name, and started again. Your father was her biggest target yet. Julie was already dialing her phone. I'm calling the DA. With this history, she's facing life in prison. There's one more thing, the detective added. He handed me a small USB drive. We found this in her safety deposit box. It's a video of your father confronting her about the journal. We thought you'd want to see it. With shaking hands, I plugged the USB into Dad's computer. His face appeared on the screen, sitting in this very study, looking straight at Mary. I know what you're planning, Dad said, his voice strong. I've read your journal. You've had quite the criminal career, haven't you, Jennifer? On the screen, Mary's face turned white. How did you? Did you really think I wouldn't look into the woman trying to destroy my family?
Dad said.
I've known who you really are since the day you started working at my company. Then why, she asked. Why did you let me stay? Because sometimes the best way to catch a snake, Dad said, leaning closer, is to let it think it's winning. You're dying, Jennifer spat at him. You can't stop me. Dad gave a cold laugh. My dear, I already have. You just don't know it yet. The video ended, leaving the room completely silent. He knew, I whispered. He knew everything from the start. And he built a perfect case, Julie added. One that would protect you and expose everyone helping her. The detective picked up his papers. The FBI wants to speak with you tomorrow. With this journal and your father's evidence, we can take down her entire operation. After he left, I walked over to Dad's chair and ran my hand over the worn leather. He had let her believe she was winning, all while making sure she'd never hurt anyone again. Classic Dad, Frank said with a small smile. Always thinking ahead. Julie's phone buzzed. The DA just approved the new charges, she said. It's officially a federal case now. Jennifer won't ever leave prison again. I picked up Dad's journal, the one he'd written in for years, and flipped to the final entry. Sometimes justice takes patience. Sometimes it takes sacrifice. But most of all, it takes faith in the truth. Lauren will understand when the time comes. The garden will bloom again, stronger than before. The next court session is tomorrow, Julie said gently. Are you ready to finish this? I looked around at the documents, the journal, and out the window toward the garden where this all began. Yes, I said. It's time to finish it. For Dad. For everyone she's hurt. And for you, Frank added softly. Mostly for you. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom like thunder. In light of the overwhelming evidence and the added federal charges, the judge said, this court sentences Jennifer Aniston, also known as Mary Henry, to life in prison without the chance of parole. Jennifer, stood stiff in her orange jumpsuit. All signs of her fake charm were gone. As she was led past us, she stopped and looked at me one last time. I hope you're happy, she hissed. You've ruined everything. No, I said calmly. You did that to yourself. The only difference is this time, your victim fought back. The bailiff pulled her away as she tried to say more. Behind her, James was already being led out to begin his own 17-year sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around, shouting questions. But Julie stepped forward, her voice firm and clear. My client has no comment, except to say that justice has been served. Not just for her family, but for all the families affected by these crimes. Back at the house, Frank was waiting with something in his hand. The FBI finished going through Dad's study, he said. And they found this hidden in his desk. He handed me a small box. Inside was a single key and a note. For when justice blooms, check the greenhouse. The greenhouse had always been Dad's private space, a quiet place he went to think. I hadn't stepped into the greenhouse since Dad died. Do you want us to come with you? Julie asked gently. I shook my head. I need to do this alone. The key turned easily in the lock. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the sweet smell of blooming flowers. Dad's orchids were still alive, beautiful and well cared for. I guess Frank had been looking after them these past few months. In the middle of the greenhouse was Dad's old workbench. On top of it sat a large envelope with my name on it. Inside was a property deed and a letter. My dearest Lauren, by now, justice has been done, and the truth is out. But justice wasn't the only thing I wanted to grow in this greenhouse. I didn't just grow flowers here. I grew hope. Hope that you'd find your strength again. Hope that you'd bloom, even when others tried to keep you in the dark. The deed in this envelope is for the empty lot next to your old flower shop. I bought it the day after I confronted Jennifer. It's time for Jeremy Gardens to grow beyond our home. You have a gift, Lauren. You bring beauty into the world. That shouldn't be limited to one garden. Remember what I taught you. Some flowers bloom best after frost. You've made it through your winter. Now it's time to bloom again. Love always.
Dad.
I walked back to the house in a daze, holding the letter and deed tightly. Frank and Julie were waiting in the kitchen.
Well,
Frank asked. I spread the deed out on the counter. He bought the lot next to my old shop. He wanted me to grow the business. That's not all he did, Julie said, pulling out her tablet. He registered Jeremy Gardens as a business named 7 months ago. He set up everything, permits, funding, business plans. It's all ready. It just needs you. And us, Frank added. I've picked up a few gardening tips lately. Someone had to keep those orchids alive. Just then, there was a knock at the door. The detective stepped in, smiling. I thought you'd like to know. 2 more people have come forward. They were also victims of Jennifer's scams. With your dad's evidence, we're about to close more than a dozen unsolved cases. Dad would have loved that, I said. He always believed the truth comes out in the end. Speaking of truth, Frank said after the detective left, I found something else while I was taking care of the greenhouse. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a small plaque tucked among the orchids. It read, For Lauren, who taught me that the strongest flowers grow in broken places. He put that there right after your divorce, Frank said. I think he always knew you'd find your way back. Julie smiled and pulled out her legal pad, that familiar spark in her eyes. So, she said, should we get started? I started working on the business papers for Jeremy Gardens. As I looked out at Dad's garden, the roses were still blooming, still standing strong, no matter what had happened. Beyond the flowers, I could see the future Dad had imagined for me. He didn't just want justice. He wanted me to grow. He didn't want me to just survive. He wanted me to thrive. Yes, I said, feeling stronger than I had in years. It's time to build something new. To Dad, Frank said, lifting his coffee mug. To justice, Julie added, raising hers. I picked up my own mug, thinking of orchids and roses, of truth, of endings and new beginnings. To blooming again. Through the window, the garden glowed in the afternoon sunlight. Each flower was proof of Dad's belief that even in life's hardest moments, something beautiful can still grow. He gave me more than justice. He gave me back my future, one bloom at a time.